If you like this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos we come out with. This happened around July or August 1985 to the best of my knowledge. I was traveling on I-435 west toward I-35 south after leaving our home in Kansas City, Kansas en route to Olathe, Kansas. My just under 6-year-old son was in the front seat of the car with me and my 1-year-old in the back in his car seat. I remember it was about 10:30 p.m. because we were on our way to pick up my then husband from work at Mid-America Nazarene College in Olathe, Kansas. He worked the evening shift and we had one car, otherwise the children would have been in bed by that time. Above was a dark, cloudless sky as I was driving with the radio on. I thought it odd that the radio announcer was saying that the residents in the area were not to be alarmed by what we were seeing, as it wasn't a UFO but merely a Russian satellite re-entering orbit. I thought, well, that's weird. But I was in my mid-20s and busy raising kids, so didn't think much about it. I didn't see anything at the immediate time of the announcement, but when I got further down the highway, all of a sudden this huge rectangle object that had glowing red-orange borders lighting up any linear shape within and outside it came slowly, very slowly floating above. It had a grid pattern to it as if a building were cut in half and you could see all the stories of the floors lit up along the edges. They weren't windows unless they could be described as floor to unobstructed ceiling windows. It actually looked as if the walls were transparent. I could see what would be the right side of the craft and the underbelly looking from an angle. All this happened within a couple of minutes of hearing the radio broadcast. When it was still behind me somewhat because I could see it peripherally, I noticed that there were many cars pulled over on the side of the highway going both south and northbound. A lot of cars with their occupants outside of them looking and pointing up into the air. Normally, I'd never do such a thing as to pull over on an interstate highway unless it was major important, but this now met that criteria. Even my young son was wondering aloud why all the people were outside by the road. I pulled over and even allowed him to come to stand beside me, eventually sitting him on the trunk of the car to have him close. By the time the usually busy highway had slowed down, both due to the later hour but also because so many of us had stopped to watch something out of this world. It was completely silent except the few cars that I guess had a lot more going on than to bother to stop and look at this giant glowing box moving slow overhead. I could see each detail of the floors that looked large enough for a small plane or car to go through an opening as if it were a multi-storied hangar. Each outline of a wall or floor made up numerous stories high and glowed red-orange. I swear I thought I could even see an outline silhouette of a couple of people in different windows, but chalked that up to seeing things. I mean, I was looking at a giant floating box. The insanity of seeing people within it didn't seem too far away. The object seemed like it was a couple of football fields in length and a football field in height. It passed by about a half-mile above. My 6 years old was bug-eyed and held my hand tightly. I wasn't afraid so much as I was curious, intrigued, and dumbfounded. I didn't feel like we were in any danger. We stayed watching for about a half hour as it moved from what seems like the northeast to the southwest direction. I'm not great at directions, so that's my best shot. The land is flat in that area around, so there were no obstructions to block my view. After about 20 to 30 minutes I got to thinking my husband was going to get worried that we hadn't arrived yet. I told my son we needed to get going as we had seen the whole thing go right over the top of us. We started back on the road and again the radio was repeating how it wasn't a UFO but burning up satellite, and that just didn't feel right to me. It felt like a UFO experience, most definitely. It looked outer-worldly. I glanced away as I re-entered the highway. As I got a little bit further down the road the object seemed to disappear. I told my husband about it and my son was excitedly adding in his observations. I kept listening to the news on TV or the radio the next few days to hear anything else about it, and there was none. Just a total clam up about the event. After that night I didn't discuss it anymore until just a few months ago during a phone conversation with my now grown son. During our visit he suddenly asked me if I remember the UFO we saw when I was little. Inside me I was elated. I was so happy to hear that it wasn't some kind of false memory, that I'd made some story up. Even though I'd not talked about it since the event, I certainly did think of it. My adult son started describing to me what he remembered, and it was so much of the same experience I had at the time. He was like, "Wow, Mum." And I was like, "No kidding, son, it was something else."